For 27 minutes, George Gorman was entangled in a dogfight with a luminous flying object moving in abnormal speeds going directly upwards. Welcome to the Paranormal Post. I'm Clayton Morris. If you love true stories of the unexplained, then smash that like button. It really helps. And please subscribe. There's also one more thing that you can do, is turn on that little bell notification so you'll receive a little notification whenever we publish a new video. Well, aliens have been the focal point in any conspiracy theory of the modern age. In my opinion, I don't think we are alone in this universe. How could we be? We are the only living, breathing creatures in the entire massive universe. In fact, there are more planets than we humans could ever count. There's no way that life didn't develop on other planets. Maybe creatures who breathe other kinds of, toxic air that we couldn't breathe ourselves. But what if those creatures are also curious about us? What if they are studying us? Today, we're going to talk about the George Gorman incident with an unidentified flying object in the middle of the air equivalent of nowhere. George Gorman, on October 1st, 1948, he was 25 years old, and Gorman was a veteran fighter pilot who served in the Second World War. But at the time, he was the second lieutenant in the North Dakota Air National Guard. He was participating in cross-country flight with other National Guard pilots. He was flying a P-51 Mustang, those awesome aircraft. And the incident occurred when the other pilots landed in Fargo's Hector Airport at about 8:30 p.m. Gorman stayed in the air in order to get some night flying time in the cloudless conditions. At about 9 p.m., he flew over a football stadium where a high school football game was being held. And he also noticed a small Piper Cub plane flying about 500 feet below him. Then he witnessed what he believed to be the taillight of another aircraft passing on the right side, though the tower had no other object on radar at the time. Then at 9:07 p.m., Gorman contacted the control tower at Fargo's Hector Airport and asked if there were any other air traffic in the area other than the P-51 Mustang and that Piper Cub, to which they said there were none. They then contacted the Cub's pilot, Dr. A.D. Cannon, and his passenger, and they confirmed that they could also see a lighted object to the west. Gorman then decided to take a closer look at the unidentified object. He pulled his plane up and closed to within 1,000 yards. Gorman described the object as large in diameter, clear and white, without fuzz at the edges. It was blinking on and off as it approached. However, the light suddenly became steady and pulled into a sharp left bank. He said, "I thought it was making a pass at the tower." Then, Gorman got a little too curious and took a pass on a closer look opportunity. He tried to catch up to the object, reporting that he finally got behind it at about 7,000 feet, where it made a sharp turn and headed straight towards him. In fact, the object got too close that it was about to collide with the P-51. Gorman then dived and said the light passed right over his canopy at about 500 feet before cutting sharply once more and heading back in his direction. Again, at the brink of collision. Gorman said the object went straight up in the air in a steep climb, so steep that when he tried to intercept, his plane stalled at about 14,000 feet. The unidentified flying object was not seen again, but Gorman claims that the two of them engaged in aerial maneuvers with it for 27 minutes by the time he landed his P-51. In the aftermath of all of this man, remember, was a veteran. Scaring him was a near impossible job, yet the encounter shook his core. He went on to report that he noticed no sound, no exhaust trail, no odor from the object at all. Although he had reached speeds of up to 400 miles per hour while pursuing the object, he couldn't keep up with it, whatever it was. Gorman said later in a sworn statement to his commander, quote, "I am convinced that there was a definite thought behind its maneuvers. I am further convinced that the object was governed by the laws of inertia because its acceleration was rapid but not immediate. And although it was able to turn fairly tight at considerable speed, it still followed a natural curve." But because of the excessive speed, Gorman lost consciousness for a split second, which is only normal given the gravity-defying fast motion. Remember, the human body can't sustain that amount of G-forces for very long. He said, "Look, I'm in fairly good physical condition, and I do not believe that there are many, if any, pilots who could withstand the turn and speed affected by the object and remain conscious." The object was not only able to outturn and outspeed my aircraft, he said, but was able to attain a far steeper climb and was able to maintain a constant rate of climb far in excess of my aircraft, end quote. Now let's talk about the witnesses. As we already established, George Gorman was not the only pilot that night who saw the UFO on that mysterious night. Remember when I mentioned that he saw a Piper Cub aircraft and he contacted the air traffic control tower. The object was noticed by air traffic controllers Lloyd Jensen and H.E. Johnson, who were manning the Hector Airport Tower that night. According to Johnson, he saw the UFO and the Piper Cub at the same time. The object was traveling at a high rate of speed and was fast enough to increase the space between itself and Gorman's P-51. He also described the object as only a round light, perfectly formed, with no fuzzy edges or rays leaving its body. That's the exact same description that Gorman gave. The Piper Cub's pilot, Dr. A.E. Cannon, and his passengers also reported seeing the objects while maintaining a nice safe distance. Then, returning to the airport, they immediately joined the traffic controllers in the tower to talk about it. Cannon described the light as, quote, very swiftly, much faster than the P-51. In addition to the pilots, there were 2 Civil Aeronautics Authority employees on the ground also reported seeing the object. So what are the possibilities? Well, with all this being said, everyone had been looking since 1948 for a possible explanation to what the object was that night. So let's take a look at the number of theories from that evening. Well, early in 1948, Chuck Yeager, who just passed away just a few weeks ago, made his famous flight in the Bell X-1 at a record-breaking speed in which he broke the sound barrier. They named an airport after him in West Virginia. This theory is presented by Dr. Travis Taylor, aerospace engineer and author of Introduction to Rocket Science and Engineering. He says that a craft like that would have been very obvious to a pilot in a P-51, Gorman, for instance. He would have known what he was looking at. The X-1 craft looked like an airplane. So if he was chasing a craft like what Yeager was flying at the time in these tests, then we would have known what it is. It looked like an airplane. If he was chasing something that didn't look like a standard aircraft and he couldn't keep up with it, either way it was too far away and he didn't realize how far away it was, or it was moving faster than a P-51 could move. So clearly, probably not that craft. After arriving at Fargo, U.S. Air Force investigators, where Yeager was doing his countermeasures of Gorman's plane, revealed heightened radioactivity, though this was later explained away as a side effect of the high altitude flying that took place. So his craft had higher than normal radioactivity on the P-51. Government investigators found him to be a credible witness also. Gorman was not nutty, noting that he did not make the impression of being a dreamer. He reads a little and only serious literature. He spends 90% of his time hunting and fishing. He drinks less than moderately, smokes normally, and does not do drugs. He appears to be a serious and sincere individual who is considerably puzzled by his experience and made no attempt to blow up his story. He didn't take it to the newspapers and try to become famous. So was Gorman's brain too damaged by radioactivity and the high altitude that he started imagining things at the time? Theory number 2. With World War II, a very recent memory, tensions in 1948 were heightened by both military and civilian circles. Thus, the object may have been a top-secret test craft. As the Cold War began seeping into the Americans' minds, the U.S. government was seeking to boost its scientific findings to have an upper hand, of course, against the Russians. And a clandestine initiative called Operation Paperclip was born. Though it recruited former Nazi scientists, engineers, and technicians, including V-2 rocket beam founder Wernher von Braun, to America to help boost the nation's chances in the Cold Wars. All of that happened. Yes, it's true. In the same year when Gorman had his encounter, the Soviets had begun testing the R-1 rocket, which is their version of the German V-2. This raised the question if the object he was actually witnessing that night was a Soviet rocket. But the R-1 didn't have the range to go from wherever their launch capability was in the Soviet Union to Fargo, North Dakota. In addition, rockets can't do slow maneuvers very easily, and those types of high-speed maneuvers, they start breaking apart. It would fall apart immediately. But do you think a veteran pilot would have never seen a V-1 or R-1 in his life, or any kind of rocket? Do you think the Soviet Union could go for a test drive for their new rocket inside the American borders? That theory sounds ludicrous, and yet people think that that's the case. Here's theory number 3. This theory is the one that's mainly used to explain the encounter and the official cause of the encounter in the Project Blue Book file. The Air Weather Service revealed that it had released a lighted weather balloon 10 minutes before Gorman first saw the object in the same place. Investigators were more inclined towards the option where the balloon is the likeliest explanation for the object. They believe it's a lighted air balloon, weather balloon, launched 10 minutes beforehand, doing incredible maneuvers. As for the abnormal speed previously mentioned, the report says that those were due to Gorman's own maneuvers as he tried to chase the bright object. Investigators claim that this high speed gave the balloon the appearance of moving in the opposite direction as he passed by. They also added that the bright appearance of Jupiter that night could have had an issue, hypothesizing that Gorman had been attempting to chase the bright dot of the planet at the same time as the weather balloon was in range. Really? Dr. Travis S. Taylor has previously said, quote, "We were doing Project Mogul at the time, which was the high-altitude balloons fitted with high-powered microphones, and we were doing above-ground nuclear testing. So while this connection with the Gorman UFO Dogfight, the Mexico UFO sighting that was explained away as a Project Mogul weather balloon, so those are now tied together? Doesn't seem right. How would you mistake Jupiter with a flying ball that's doing incredible maneuvers and chasing you?" It's still unclear whether George Gorman accepted any of these theories. He had never spoken publicly after the fact. He later returned to the Air Force full-time and retired in 1969 at the rank of lieutenant colonel. He died in 1982. According to the Bismarck Tribune, he told his friends, quote, he was never convinced that he had been dueling with a lighted balloon for 27 minutes. What do you think? If you like this video, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. That way you'll never miss one of our videos. And share it with your friends who are interested in UFOs and alien encounters. And let me know in the comments which theory you think is closest to reality. Or if you have a new theory, I would love to hear it. We'll see you next time.